Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. In this video, we're going to be doing a follow-up to our last video where we kind of considered places to live and cost of living. In this video, we're going to focus on how much we can make in those areas and couple that with what your market value is. Now this is both beneficial as you consider job offers and also comparing the cost of living in different places, as well as each year when reviews come around and such, being able to know if the compensation you're receiving stacks up against the competition. So let's dive in. Now as we dive in today and we look at some of the resources that I'm going to show you, one of the things that I want to point out is that these are resources that I used last year to get a 30% raise. Now I will put a little disclaimer there and note that I was being underpaid, so take it with a grain of salt. But these are definitely useful resources, and these are resources that you should use as you evaluate job offers. Now looking back at the data that I compiled from last year when I went about all of this, it looks like I used about 3 different sites. I used Glassdoor, I used Salary.com, and I used PayScale. Now part of the reason that I used 3 different ones is I wanted to get a breadth of data. Each of these sites kind of came in with different numbers. The one I knew would carry the most weight though was PayScale, as I already knew that's what my employer used when looking at compensation and where we were at. So I'm going to go ahead, we're going to start with that one. We may look at Glassdoor a little bit. We may look at Salary.com, we may look at Indeed.com, and then we're going to look at another one that's more in particular, or at least started as one for tech jobs. And we're going to look at the way that it breaks down things because I really kind of like the breakdown that it gives. So let's start off with PayScale. So on PayScale, you're able to create an account, and with that account, you're able to look at stuff for both you, for your business, and do compensation research. Now, compensation research is the one that we want to check out. Going into compensation research and selecting to see all, well, you see there's a number of different things in here, but if we just go ahead and scroll all the way down to the bottom, we can see the what am I worth? And this allows us to look at both of our skills, the job market for the job we're looking at, and kind of see where we land, or at least what the range should be. So let's go ahead, let's click on that. We come in here. For this, we're just going to do just exploring, because we don't have a job offer in front of us, but we want to kind of see where things may wind up. So for instance, we were looking at Houston some. Let's go ahead and speculate that we have something in Houston. So we'll select that. We'll select an individual. Potential job title, we're just going to put software engineer. Here we go. So we get this nice form back that shows software engineer, Houston, Texas, with 4 years of experience. The market range is anywhere from $55,000 on the low end to $102,000 on the high end. So that puts the median right at $76,000, which is just about where we are here. So we can look down some, we can see variable pay for bonuses. It can range anywhere from $2,000 to $16,000. Profit sharing is anywhere from $800 to $18,000. Now, profit sharing is not something I had at my previous job. Bonuses were kind of a thing, but it changed from a quarterly thing to being a yearly thing. And we didn't quite make it to the yearly one, so kind of hard to say where we'd land with that. Your market worth over time. So Houston, when compared to the rest of the United States, so the United States is, it looks like our dotted line. Houston is our dark blue line, so it's a little bit below the national average we can see, but we do have a 5-year change of 6%, so value has increased 5%. And then at the very bottom, we can see something where skills that impact pay, we can see a little bit of a breakdown of what sort of certificates or training can get us better pay. One of them that I noticed right off the bat is this AWS. I imagine an AWS certificate would fill this and probably having a job where you use that skill, but that increases your pay by 23%. That's another $19,000 that you can be making by having that skill, having that certification, and being able to work in that space. Now is a little bit of a comparison. This is kind of a step older, but if we come back here and we look at Orem, we see that our market range is anywhere from $50,000 to $95,000. Our bonus is between 6 and 8, so that's a little bit different than our 2 to 16. Actually, that's way different. So in Houston, it was anywhere from 2,000 to 16,000. Orem, it's 600 to 8,000. So a bit different with the bonus pay. Market worth has a 7% change. Again, below the national average though. Market worth of 72,000. Houston was saying 73. So it does shift a little bit. Median is a little lower here, but it allows us to kind of compare some. And here's the interesting part. Houston had a much lower cost of living, right? So if we look at this, we know Houston has a lower cost of living, and the median salary there is higher than the median salary in Orem. So we can see median salary in Houston was 76, median salary in Orem is 71. On the low end, you're at 50,000 here in Orem, and in Houston, you're at 55. So what this tells me is in a place like Houston, I should be making more money and it should be costing me less to live. That sounds like a really good gig right there. All right, so let's go ahead and just explore. We've got a place that we did apply to, so let's go ahead and see if we can get, an actual number for what they might come at us with. All right, and submitting all that, we get back that there's actually a report limit that you can hit, which is somewhat unfortunate, as I don't think there's a way to delete old reports that I have found, which is really kind of frustrating. This is something that I would definitely say is a downside, because you've got no way to go back and modify these any. So know that the max reports that you can get at PayScale is 10 reports, which I see now that there's a remaining thing. I wish I would have noticed that a bit earlier and figured out what that was. So you get a total of 10 reports from PayScale for free, after which it looks like you do need to create 5 personal salary reports per year. I guess I have blown through all of mine, so that's unfortunate. Even if you delete reports, which I haven't figured out how to do that, they do still count against you. So kind of keep that in mind. If you already have a job, this is something that I would say you should use to evaluate, where you are, where you should be. Maybe not what I would use if you're evaluating job offers, as it looks like you can probably burn through those pretty quick. So from there, let's go ahead and move on to Glassdoor. Now Glassdoor is a little bit more user-friendly, we'll say. It's a little bit easier to tweak things with. So we can look at software engineer salaries in Provo, Utah. We have pulled up here. So for companies that we're just going to, for all industries, so across the board, 4 to 6 years of experience. So smaller size company, we see average base pay is $75,000, which they show as being 11% below the national average. Now we are going to want to duplicate this. Now the nice part here is we can see that they feel like this number is very accurate. We see up here they have very high confidence that the numbers are fresh. They've got recent salary reports to be basing this off of. We can kind of see what bonuses might range between and such here. Now for where we just applied, we can kind of bump this up. We can tweak this around some, and we can see kind of how that affects our potential pay. Now it looks like, for some things they maybe don't have as much information. For instance, you start tweaking some of this stuff and it starts looking a bit wonky, like what is up with that? I don't even know what that's supposed to be. But again, to look up a salary, we can come in here, we can put in a location. So we can, once again, we'll just play with Houston a little bit more. So Glassdoor shows us something that's a little bit different than what PayScale showed us. If we look at a company between 200 and 500 employees with a person having 1 to 3 years of experience, it says Provo, we'd be making about $68,000 a year, whereas Houston, you'd be making $67,000. So we've got a little bit different numbers than we were seeing on PayScale. Now if we jump over to Indeed, we get a little bit larger view when we do this. So we say software engineer, United States, so we can kind of see across the board the average base salary is $109,000. Now that's probably going to be, that's across quite a range of engineers. So let's go ahead and come down some. We can see by years of experience, we've got much higher numbers than you'll find in Utah. If we continue down though, we can kind of see the breakdown between different places in the United States. We can see Austin's listed at number 7 with 115,000 per year. But then we kind of get an overview down here at the bottom too of the entire United States, where we can see, if we hover over Texas, we see that it's 4% below the national average, but Utah is even lower at 15% below the national average. Plugging in the actual numbers, we get something even more interesting. We can see that the per year average base salary for a software engineer in Houston, Texas is $102,000. Now, if we scroll down a little bit more, we can see that 1 to 2 years, we're getting anywhere between 96 and 98,000. We don't seem to have anything for 3 to 5 years. We can look across Texas and we can see that Houston is actually ranking towards the bottom, with Richardson, Texas showing as the best place for software engineers in Texas. Now, if we go ahead and compare that to Provo, we see here again, we've got different numbers coming up, where here on Indeed is showing that the average base salary per year is $110,000. We can also actually see how it is calculating this, with this being based off of 59 salaries reported as of June 24th. 1 year of experience being at 102,000, 1 to 2 being at 105, and so on. Now this starts becoming very interesting, because as you look at actual jobs and what they seem to pay, you don't see these same numbers. So I'm curious what level of software engineers are reporting these numbers, as most of the listings that you find do not reflect this. So quite interesting here. And one more for a little icing on the cake. Let's go ahead and look at the LinkedIn one. Looking at software engineers in the Provo area, we see something much different again. When we looked at Glassdoor, we were getting a number of about $68,000 a year base pay. Indeed gave us a number for Provo at $110,000. And here on LinkedIn, we're seeing $80,000 a year, with that range between $56,000 and $110,000. Well, that's kind of interesting because it kind of smashes it in between the two, which is kind of a good thing because that's getting us more of an average. So we can decide to go ahead and look at more information. We can see, what the bonus range is, what the sign-on bonus, RSU, stock options, how some of these different things stack up. We've got a number of different salaries reported in the area. For example, Adobe is relatively close. 10 salaries reported coming in at $96,000 a year. We've got Semantic at 99, Overstock at 102, and the rest of those I don't really recognize. But again, this is helping give us something of an idea of what the area is able to support. Jumping back to Houston again, we see something very similar where it says base salary is $80,000. Once again though, we see that range similarly to PayScale scale up, in that it shows a range from $59,000 to $115,000, as compared to the previous for Provo of $56,000 to $110,000. And some of the companies that it's pulling these numbers for include Chevron, ExxonMobil, JP Morgan Chase, and a number of others that I have never heard of in my life. So when we've looked at this data, we're able to get a pretty good idea. It looks like comparatively, at least with Houston, we're able to see, all right, if we move from Provo-Orem area to Houston, our cost of living goes down, our housing costs go way down, and we're keeping pretty level, if not increasing the amount of money that we're able to make. So this kind of tells me that that move would probably be a good move. Now, whether we actually make that move or not is to be determined. But, this is some of the process that you can go through as you're comparing different locales and such, and how it might work out to actually live there. Now, there's one more site that I want to look at real quick, and that is Levels. Levels is something relatively new, and it breaks down salaries in a way unlike any of the other sites. And this tailors more specifically to software engineering jobs and the like. So let's take a look here. One of the things that Levels does really well is break down what the actual different levels within a company are and what they equate to. For example, we can see how Google, Facebook, and Microsoft all compare to each other. And at each level, what that job title is and what that actually translates to. Depending on where you're working, you don't get super robust titles. For example, at my last place of employment, pretty much everyone was just called a software engineer. And there's some niceties to that in that, you're all kind of the same. You're all just software engineers, but it becomes a detriment when it comes to compensation in that based on experience and where you're actually at, it's not reflected and not necessarily easy to tell what your compensation should be as compared to some of these places that are much more robust. Right off the bat, when we come on here, we can select a bunch of different places to compare or whatnot, but we're looking at software engineers for Google, Facebook, and Microsoft. And we can see, we've got software developer engineer. We've got whatever a 60 is, software developer engineer 2, senior software developer engineer, principal partner, distinguished engineer. And you get an idea for what each of these different titles equates to. So we've got different monikers between them. Google goes with L3, L4, L5, and so on. Facebook, E3, E4, and so on. And with each of these, we're able to see how it breaks down. So for example, here on Google, we've got L3, which equates to a software engineer 2. Now, if we look at this, we can see that L3T3 is a new grad software engineering role at Google. So these are brand new graduates out of college. Salary starting off is $125,000. Stock, which I'm not sure if that's a grant or options. I think it's a grant. That comes in at another $40,000 plus $20,000 in bonuses for a total of $187,000. Now we can dive a bit deeper into this and we can look at the full details. We can see alternative titles, software engineer level 2. We can see the total pay versus the base, the stock, the bonus. And now obviously if the stock is a grant, it's going to kind of change what that compensation really equates to based on your company's stock value and how much it's fluctuating. With something like Google, Tesla, Apple, some of these are pretty stable and most of the time they don't dip too much. And especially Tesla right now, if you're getting Tesla stock grants, you've got to be loving life because that stock is just going through the roof. Now if we look to the right here, we can also see kind of the different range of things between the L3, L4, L5, and we can see kind of how those all scale. Now one of the things that I do want to point out though, and that I think is important to note, if we look at this chart, your mind kind of explodes because it's like, wow, you go up each level and you're making so much more. But it's not necessarily that you're making more. And to illustrate this, let's go ahead and look at the software engineer 3. Now, our base pay has only increased about $20,000. For our level 1, we're at 125. We come up to, or for our level 2, sorry. If we go up to a level 3 or an L4, we're making 153. So we've gone up about $25,000 in pay. But look at the difference in the stock grant. And this is important. The stock grant for an L3 is $40,000, whereas the stock grant for an L4 is $82,000. So you're making more, but you're not. Your base pay's only gone up so much, and they're compensating you with more stock rather than more pay. Now, I don't know what Google's rules are on how quickly you can cash out that stock, so it can kind of vary how much you're really making. But I think that's something that's important to remember as you look at some of these different salaries that get reported. And I think it's important to make sure you're differentiating between salary and total pay, because some of these companies that have stock options, you have the potential to make a lot more. You could also lose that, but there is that potential there. Whereas if you're working for a private company like I was previously and you don't have the option for stock grants, there's that extra bonus that you're not really getting. Now, one of the last things I want to say about this site, about Levels.fyi, is it is relatively new. I believe it's only just a few years old. I came across it probably a year or two ago, found it quite intriguing. At the time, they only had a few companies' datas up here. They basically only had Google, Apple, Amazon, Microsoft, and maybe Tesla. Since then, they've added a lot more. They've got a lot more jobs than just software engineering that I'm seeing right now. I see that they do have options for different business, engineering, operations. So they're definitely growing. I like how it breaks things down, and I think it's much more transparent. However, I don't know what the accuracy is. And that's the only thing I kind of question with this site. Everything else and the way it breaks it down, I really like and I really appreciate. The only thing I'm not as sure about is just how accurate all of that data is. But assuming everybody's being honest and the information that they're contributing to the site is accurate, I find it very useful, and it's definitely something that I'd want to use more in the future. So I know that was quick. I know it's just kind of a rough overview of everything. I've got links to all the sites that I talked about in the description below. Go ahead and check them out. If you have any questions, feel free to continue the discussion in the comments below. Otherwise, I hope you found this useful. If you did, please leave a thumbs up. Let me know what else you'd like to know about this or other aspects of job hunting, or what I'm looking at when I'm trying to find a new job. And maybe we'll address those in the next video. But until then, keep being awesome, and I'll see you guys next time. So long.